I discovered I was earning 22% less than Derek, a newly hired consultant who couldn't even create a basic pivot table. When I confronted HR Director Patricia Hamilton about this obvious pay inequity, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "He has an MBA from a prestigious business school. You'll understand that certain educational backgrounds command premium compensation." Then came the ultimatum that changed everything. Accept it or leave. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't demand explanations. I simply smiled, typed my resignation letter, and walked out at exactly 1:59 in the afternoon. 31 minutes later, my phone started ringing. My name is Roxanne Crawford, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found my perfect job at Meridian Financial Solutions. I started as an intern straight out of Indiana University, where I graduated summa cum laude with a finance degree I paid for entirely through scholarships, student loans, and working 20 hours a week at the campus library. Meridian handled investment portfolios for mid-sized corporations across the Midwest, and I loved the analytical challenge of making sense of complex financial data. During my first year, I threw myself into every project with determination that bordered on obsession. I earned my CPA certification while working full-time studying late into the night after 10-hour days at the office. By year 2, I'd built our entire quarterly reporting system from scratch, automating processes that used to take the accounting department weeks to complete. My supervisor, Janet Morrison, constantly praised my work, telling me I had a natural gift for seeing patterns others missed. The company culture felt supportive and merit-based. We were small enough that everyone knew each other's contributions, and I believed hard work would be rewarded fairly. Growing up in rural Indiana with a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on our table, I'd learned that dedication and persistence were the keys to success. My mother always told me, "Roxanne, if you work twice as hard as everyone else, you'll go twice as far." I carried that belief into every spreadsheet I created, every client presentation I polished, every late night I spent perfecting our financial models. 6 weeks ago, everything started to change when Derek Patterson joined our team as a financial consultant. He arrived with considerable fanfare, introduced in our Monday morning meeting as someone who would help us expand into new market segments. Patricia Hamilton, our HR director, made a point of mentioning his MBA from Northwestern during the introduction, emphasizing how his strategic perspective would complement our existing analytical capabilities. From his first week, something felt off about Derek's performance. During client meetings, he spoke confidently about market trends and strategic positioning, but when pressed for specific details, he'd deflect to high-level concepts or promise to circle back with comprehensive analysis. I noticed he couldn't create pivot tables without asking for help, confused gross margin calculations with net profit margins, and once submitted a client presentation with mathematical errors so basic that I had to stay until 9 o'clock that night fixing them before the morning meeting. Last month alone, I corrected his work 3 separate times before it reached clients. The first incident involved a portfolio analysis, where he'd miscalculated risk ratios by confusing percentage points with actual percentages. The second was a quarterly projection that didn't account for seasonal variations our clients specifically requested. The third was a comprehensive report where he'd copied formatting from an old template but failed to update the underlying formulas, creating projections that suggested our client would somehow earn negative revenue in the 4th quarter. Each time, Derek accepted my corrections with casual gratitude, as if mathematical accuracy was just one of many optional approaches to financial analysis. He'd say things like, "Thanks for catching that detail work, Roxanne. I'm more of a big-picture thinker myself." Then he'd present the corrected analysis to clients as if he'd developed every insight himself. 2 weeks ago, I volunteered to help the overwhelmed accounting department with monthly payroll reconciliations. Our office manager, Linda, had been struggling to keep up with new compliance requirements, and I offered to assist during my lunch breaks. I'd always been good with numbers, and the extra responsibility felt like a natural extension of my analytical role. Last Friday afternoon, while organizing payroll spreadsheets on Linda's computer, I accidentally clicked the wrong tab. Instead of opening the benefits summary I needed, I found myself staring at salary information for our entire department. My heart stopped when I saw Derek's annual compensation, $78,000. I scrolled down to find my own information, $64,000. The numbers didn't make sense. I'd been with the company for 3 years, earned multiple certifications, built systems that saved us thousands of hours annually, and consistently received excellent performance reviews. Derek had been here 6 weeks, couldn't perform basic analytical tasks without supervision, and required constant correction of fundamental errors, yet he earned $14,000 more than me each year. That evening, I couldn't focus on anything else. I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the CPA study materials I'd used to earn my certification, thinking about every late night I'd spent perfecting client presentations, every weekend I'd worked to meet impossible deadlines, every time I'd gone above and beyond, because I believed excellence would be recognized and rewarded. I researched Derek's background through professional networks and public records. His MBA from Northwestern turned out to be from their evening program, completed part-time, while he managed inventory at his family's sporting goods store in suburban Chicago. His LinkedIn profile was carefully crafted to suggest consulting experience, but the actual job descriptions revealed retail management responsibilities with no financial analysis component. By Sunday morning, I'd prepared a comprehensive case for salary adjustment. I gathered documentation of my contributions, client testimonials, praising my analytical accuracy, performance reviews, highlighting my initiative and system development records, showing cost savings from my process improvements, and evidence of my professional development through continued education. I believed facts would speak for themselves. Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Patricia Hamilton to discuss my compensation structure. She agreed to see me Tuesday afternoon, suggesting we could review your career development trajectory during a brief conversation in her office. Tuesday morning, I arrived early to finalize my presentation materials. As I organized my documentation at my desk, Derek walked past, talking loudly on his phone about weekend plans with college friends. I overheard him bragging to whoever was listening. "Yeah, my fraternity brother works in HR at their parent company. He helped me negotiate my starting package. These small-town companies don't really know how to value real talent, so you have to educate them about market rates." He laughed while describing his salary negotiations, completely unaware that I could hear every word. I just threw out some big numbers and talked about my Northwestern MBA. They practically begged me to accept the offer. It's amazing how impressed these people get by the right credentials. The casual arrogance in his voice made my stomach turn. He wasn't just earning more money than me despite inferior qualifications and performance. He was actively proud of manipulating our company's compensation system through connections and credential inflation. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about fairness or merit. This was about a game I hadn't even known I was playing, with rules designed to benefit people exactly like Derek, while keeping people exactly like me grateful for whatever scraps they offered. Tuesday afternoon, I knocked on Patricia Hamilton's office door with my carefully prepared documentation folder tucked under my arm. Patricia had joined Meridian 8 months earlier from a large Chicago consulting firm, bringing what she called best practices from enterprise-level human capital management. She was known for implementing efficiency improvements that usually meant reduced benefits, stricter performance metrics, and what she termed market-aligned compensation structures. Her corner office reflected corporate sophistication that felt out of place in our modest building. Framed certifications from various HR associations covered one wall, while her desk displayed leadership awards from her previous positions. Everything about the space communicated authority and professional distance. "Come in, Roxanne. Please have a seat." Patricia gestured toward the chair across from her desk while continuing to type on her laptop. "I understand you wanted to discuss your career development. I appreciate proactive employees who take initiative in managing their professional growth." I arranged my documentation on the small table beside my chair, organizing client testimonials, performance reviews, and project summaries in logical sequence. "Thank you for making time, Patricia. I'd like to discuss my current compensation in relation to my contributions and market standards for similar positions." Patricia looked up from her screen with the polite attention she might give to any routine administrative request. "Of course, compensation discussions are important for maintaining employee satisfaction and retention. What specific concerns would you like to address?" I began with my strongest evidence, the automated reporting system I developed that eliminated 15 hours of manual work each week, saving the company approximately $39,000 annually in labor costs. I showed her client feedback praising my analytical accuracy and responsiveness, including emails where clients specifically requested to work with me on future projects. These contributions demonstrate consistent value creation beyond my basic job responsibilities, I explained, keeping my tone professional and fact-focused. I've also earned my CPA certification while maintaining full-time performance invested in continued education to stay current with industry standards and taken on additional responsibilities in systems development and training. Patricia nodded with the practiced interest of someone who'd heard similar presentations many times before. She occasionally glanced at her phone while I spoke, responding with corporate phrases like, "I can see you've been quite productive, and your engagement level is certainly noteworthy." When I finished my presentation, Patricia leaned back in her chair with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Roxanne, I appreciate the thoroughness of your preparation. It's clear you're committed to your work here. However, compensation decisions involve complex factors beyond individual productivity metrics." She opened her laptop and pulled up what appeared to be salary data and market analysis reports. "We conduct regular benchmarking studies to ensure our compensation packages remain competitive within our geographic and industry segments. Your current salary aligns with regional standards for financial analysts with your experience level and educational background." I took a deep breath knowing I was about to enter more delicate territory. I've become aware that newer team members are receiving significantly higher compensation despite having less experience and requiring more oversight. Specifically, Derek's starting salary appears to be substantially above mine, even though I have 3 years of company-specific knowledge and consistently superior performance metrics. Patricia's expression shifted from polite interest to defensive caution. She closed her laptop and folded her hands on her desk. "I can't discuss specific details about other employees' compensation packages, as you understand. However, I can explain that salary decisions are based on multiple factors, including educational credentials, market analysis, strategic value assessments, and negotiation outcomes during the hiring process." "What educational credentials justify a 22% salary difference?" I asked, maintaining my professional tone despite growing frustration. "My finance degree is from a well-respected state university. I earned highest honors, and I've completed additional professional certifications since joining the company." Patricia's pause lasted several seconds too long. When she responded, her voice carried a new edge of corporate authority. "Derek brings an MBA from a prestigious business school. You'll understand that certain educational backgrounds command premium compensation in today's market. His strategic thinking capabilities are exactly what we need for our expansion plans." I felt heat rising in my cheeks but forced myself to remain calm. "Could you explain what specific strategic thinking capabilities he's demonstrated? Because in my experience working with him, I've had to correct fundamental analytical errors on multiple occasions. Just last week, I spent 3 hours fixing calculation mistakes in his client presentation." Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Derek's value extends beyond day-to-day analytical tasks. His MBA program emphasized strategic planning, market positioning, and high-level business development. These capabilities may not be immediately visible in routine assignments, but they're essential for our long-term growth objectives." I opened my folder and pulled out examples of Derek's errors, including email chains where I'd corrected his work and client feedback indicating confusion about his presentations. These aren't routine analytical tasks. These are basic competency issues that put our client relationships at risk. Patricia glanced at the documentation without really reading it. "Roxanne, I understand you may have concerns about different working styles and approaches. However, we hired Derek specifically for his strategic perspective and industry connections. His MBA program alone required an investment that demonstrates commitment to professional excellence. My CPA certification required 2 years of study while working full-time," I replied. "That demonstrates commitment and practical application of professional excellence. And unlike an MBA program, CPA certification requires proven competency through standardized testing and ongoing education requirements." Patricia's professional mask was beginning to slip. She straightened in her chair and spoke with increasing impatience. "Look, Roxanne, this is how business works in competitive markets. Some people bring different assets to the table. Derek's educational background opens doors that frankly yours doesn't. His network connections and strategic training position him for advancement opportunities that align with our growth trajectory." I stared at her, processing what she'd just said. This wasn't about qualifications or performance. This was about a class system I'd been naive enough to think didn't exist in professional environments. Patricia wasn't defending Derek's salary based on his contributions. She was defending a hierarchy that valued credentials and connections over competence and results. So you're saying that regardless of performance accuracy or actual contributions, his MBA automatically makes him worth more than me? I asked. Patricia sighed with visible exasperation. I'm saying that compensation structures reflect market realities. Derek's background positions him as a strategic asset with upward mobility potential. You're an excellent analyst, Roxanne, and we value your contributions. But different roles have different compensation ranges based on their strategic importance to organizational objectives. The careful corporate language couldn't hide what she was really saying. I was support staff. Derek was management material, and no amount of competence would change those predetermined categories. I felt my composure starting to crack. His strategic importance required me to work until 9 o'clock last Friday, fixing errors that could have cost us a major client. How does that reflect upward mobility potential? Patricia's patience finally snapped. Roxanne, frankly, this conversation is becoming unproductive. You can accept the current compensation structure or find opportunities elsewhere that better match your expectations. Derek's MBA program alone cost more than your entire college education. Investment in quality education deserves quality returns. The condescension in her voice was no longer hidden behind corporate politeness. She wasn't just defending the pay gap. She was enjoying the power dynamic, savoring the moment of putting me in what she considered my proper place. I sat quietly for 30 seconds, letting her words sink in. Patricia had made everything crystal clear. No matter how hard I worked, how many certifications I earned, or how much value I created, I would always be viewed as inferior to someone like Derek because I hadn't been born into the right economic class to afford an expensive MBA program. But instead of anger, I felt something unexpected: clarity. Patricia had just told me exactly where I stood in their system. More importantly, she'd shown me that this system would never change regardless of my performance or potential. The game was rigged, and the only winning move was not to play. I closed my documentation folder and smiled calmly. Thank you for clarifying the company's position, Patricia. This has been very educational. I walked back to my desk with strange serenity, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. For 3 years, I'd been trying to succeed within a system that was designed to limit my success. Patricia's brutal honesty had freed me from the illusion that merit mattered more than pedigree in their world. My colleagues were busy with their usual afternoon tasks, unaware that everything had just changed. Janet Morrison was reviewing quarterly reports in her office, occasionally making notes in the margins, with her characteristic attention to detail. Sarah Chen, our junior analyst, was troubleshooting a database query that had been giving her problems all week. Derek sat at his desk, apparently reading industry publications, though I noticed he hadn't turned a page in the 10 minutes I'd been observing him. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing a resignation letter. No emotional outbursts, no detailed explanations, no demands for justice. Just a clean professional notification that my last day would be today, effective immediately. Dear Patricia and management team, I wrote, please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as Senior Financial Analyst effective immediately. My last day of employment will be today, Tuesday, March 14th. I will ensure all current projects are properly documented for transition. Thank you for the opportunities provided during my tenure. Sincerely, Roxanne Crawford. I saved copies to my personal email account and printed the letter on company letterhead. Then I began the methodical process of organizing my work for whoever would inherit it. First, I created comprehensive handover notes for every active project, including detailed instructions for accessing databases, running reports, and interpreting results. I documented passwords, file locations, and the step-by-step processes I developed for our most complex analyses. If Derek was truly the strategic thinker, Patricia claimed he'd have everything needed to manage my responsibilities. Next, I composed emails to each of my active clients explaining that I was transitioning to new opportunities and providing them with contact information for continued service. I made sure to emphasize the company's commitment to maintaining the high standards they'd come to expect, even though I privately doubted Derek's ability to meet those standards. Throughout this process, my colleagues occasionally glanced over, probably wondering why I seemed so focused and productive on an otherwise routine Tuesday afternoon. Sarah asked if I needed help with anything, noticing my unusual intensity. I smiled and assured her everything was fine, that I was just organizing some projects for better efficiency. By 1:30, I had completed 2 years' worth of documentation in less than 3 hours. Every system I'd built was explained in detail, every client relationship was properly noted, and every ongoing project was clearly outlined with next steps and deadlines. If Meridian wanted to claim Derek's MBA made him more valuable, they'd have the chance to prove it. I gathered my few personal items, the small, succulent plant my mother had given me for my desk, a coffee mug from Indiana University, and a framed photo of my family. Everything else belonged to the company and would remain exactly where I'd left it. At 1:45, I walked into Patricia's office and placed my resignation letter on her desk. She was absorbed in her computer screen, probably dealing with some other human capital management issue. "Just leave it there," she said without looking up. "I'll review whatever it is later." "Actually," I replied calmly, "you might want to read this now. It requires immediate attention." Patricia glanced up with annoyance, then picked up the letter. I watched her expression shift from irritation to confusion to alarm as she processed what she was reading. "This is effective immediately?" she asked, finally looking directly at me. "Yes," I confirmed. "As an at-will employee, I'm providing the same courtesy the company would show me in a termination situation. I'm leaving in 15 minutes. Patricia's corporate composure cracked. "Roxanne, you can't just walk out. We have protocols for resignation procedures. You need to provide 2 weeks' notice for proper transition planning." I maintained my calm smile. "I've spent the afternoon creating comprehensive documentation for all my projects and responsibilities. Everything is properly organized for whoever takes over my duties. I'm confident Derek's strategic thinking capabilities will serve him well in managing the transition." "This is completely unprofessional." Patricia's voice rose slightly. "We have the Henderson project deadline next week, and you're the primary analyst on that account. I'm sure Derek's prestigious MBA prepared him for exactly these kinds of situations," I replied. "After all, you mentioned his strategic thinking capabilities are what the company needs for expansion plans." Patricia reached for her phone, probably planning to call Marcus Webb or Janet Morrison to intervene. "You have obligations to this company, Roxanne. You can't just abandon your responsibilities because you're upset about a compensation discussion." I collected my personal items while she made frantic calls. "I'm not abandoning anything, Patricia. I'm simply accepting your earlier suggestion to find opportunities elsewhere that better match my expectations. Thank you for helping me realize it was time to move on." As I walked toward the exit, I could hear Patricia's increasingly desperate phone conversations behind me. Through the conference room window, I noticed Derek frantically trying to operate the presentation equipment for what appeared to be a client meeting scheduled to start in 30 minutes. The slides on screen looked familiar. They were based entirely on analysis I'd completed last week for the Henderson account. I reached my car at exactly 1:59 in the afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone immediately started buzzing with text messages from Sarah, who had apparently witnessed Patricia's panic from her desk. "What's happening? Patricia looks like she's about to have a breakdown." I drove to my favorite coffee shop downtown, ordered my usual vanilla latte, and found a quiet corner table. For the first time in years, I had absolutely no obligations, no deadlines, no urgent projects demanding my attention. I pulled out my phone and began researching freelance consulting opportunities in financial analysis. At 2:30, exactly, my phone rang. Marcus Webb's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Roxanne, this is Marcus. Patricia told me about your resignation, and I need to speak with you immediately. We're having some issues with the Henderson presentation, and your expertise would be invaluable. Please call me back as soon as possible." I deleted the message and continued researching consulting rates for CPA-certified financial analysts in the Midwest. According to several industry surveys, experienced professionals with my qualifications typically charged between $100 and $200 per hour for independent consulting work. By 3 o'clock, I'd received 4 more calls from Meridian, 2 from Marcus, 1 from Janet, and 1 from Patricia. I ignored them all, focusing instead on updating my resume and LinkedIn profile to reflect my new availability for consulting opportunities. Sarah texted again. "Derek completely bombed the Henderson presentation. He couldn't answer basic questions about the portfolio analysis and showed them outdated data. Mr. Henderson looked really confused and asked where you were. What should I tell people? I responded, just say I'm pursuing new opportunities. Derek will figure things out with his strategic thinking capabilities. The afternoon felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. 3 hours ago, I'd been a stressed employee trying to prove my worth to people who would never value it. Now I was a free agent with proven skills industry connections and the sudden realization that my expertise was far more portable than I'd ever imagined. My phone continued ringing throughout the afternoon, but I was too busy planning my future to worry about Meridian's immediate crisis. They'd made their choice when Patricia told me to accept their system or leave. I'd simply taken her advice more quickly than they'd expected. By 4 o'clock, I was sitting in the public library using their computers to research business registration requirements for independent consultants. The quiet environment helped me focus on practical next steps, setting up an LLC, obtaining necessary insurance, and establishing banking for consulting income. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency meeting happening right now. Patricia, Marcus, and Janet are all in the conference room with the door closed. Derek looks like he's about to throw up. What did you do? I smiled while reading about tax implications for small business owners. I took Patricia's advice about finding opportunities that match my expectations. Another text arrived from Linda in accounting. Did you really quit without notice? Marcus is asking me about payroll implications and transition documentation. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. This time, Patricia's number appeared on the screen. I decided to answer, curious about their latest approach. Roxanne, thank you for taking my call. Patricia's voice was strained, lacking the confident authority she'd displayed earlier. I've been thinking about our conversation this afternoon, and I may have been too hasty in my responses. Could we schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss this situation more thoroughly? I appreciate the call, Patricia, I replied, but I don't think there's anything left to discuss. You made the company's position very clear during our meeting. Perhaps I didn't express myself clearly. Patricia continued, her words carefully measured. What I meant to convey was that compensation structures are complex, and there may be opportunities for adjustments based on performance metrics and market analysis. I paused, letting her words hang in the air. Are you saying Derek's MBA doesn't automatically make him more valuable than me? Patricia's hesitation spoke volumes. I'm saying that all factors should be considered when evaluating compensation equity. Your contributions have certainly been significant, and we should explore how to better recognize that value. That's interesting, I said. This morning you told me Derek's educational background opens doors that mine doesn't, and that different roles have different compensation ranges based on strategic importance. Has something changed since then? Roxanne, we value you as an employee, and we don't want to lose your expertise over what might have been a miscommunication. Patricia was clearly reading from talking points probably developed during their emergency meeting. Would you consider staying through the end of the month for transition purposes? We could discuss compensation adjustments during that time frame. I watched college students studying at nearby tables, remembering my own years of working multiple jobs to afford my education. I appreciate the offer, Patricia, but I've already accepted another opportunity that better aligns with my professional goals. This wasn't technically true yet, but Patricia didn't know that. Another opportunity. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. When did this happen? You just resigned a few hours ago. Sometimes opportunities present themselves quickly when you're open to them, I replied. I should mention that Thomas Henderson called me personally about 30 minutes ago. This was true. Henderson had called, though not about employment. Henderson called you directly. Patricia's panic was becoming obvious. What did he want? He was concerned about this afternoon's presentation quality and asked about my future availability, I explained. Apparently, he specifically requested to work with me on upcoming projects. Through the phone, I could hear muffled voices in the background, probably Marcus and Janet asking for updates on the conversation. Roxanne, let's be realistic about this, Patricia said, her corporate polish completely gone. Whatever offer you received, I'm confident we can match or exceed it. You've invested 3 years building relationships here. Why throw that away over a single conversation that may have been misunderstood? Because that conversation revealed something important about how this company views my potential, I replied. You didn't misunderstand anything, Patricia. You told me exactly where I stand in your system. At 4:15, Marcus Webb called directly. His approach was more pragmatic than Patricia's damage control attempt. Roxanne, this is Marcus. I understand there was some kind of compensation discussion that didn't go well, and now we're facing a significant operational challenge. Can we talk honestly about what it would take for you to reconsider your resignation?" I appreciated his directness. "I can talk honestly, Marcus, but I'm not reconsidering my resignation. That decision is final." "Okay, I respect that," Marcus continued, "but we're in a bind here. Derek isn't ready to handle your responsibilities independently, and we have critical deadlines next week. Would you consider consulting work to help with the transition?" This was an interesting development. "What kind of consulting arrangement are you proposing?" "Whatever you think is fair," Marcus replied. "We need someone who understands our systems and client relationships to ensure continuity of service. Name your terms." I pulled up the consulting rates I'd been researching. Independent financial consultants with CPA certification typically charge $150 to $200 per hour in this market. I'd consider a consulting arrangement at $150 per hour, minimum 20 hours per week, with a 6-month contract. Marcus was quiet for several seconds, probably calculating the cost. "That's more than double your current hourly rate as an employee." "That's correct," I confirmed. "It's also market rate for independent consulting services. Employee compensation and consulting fees are structured differently, as you know." "Can I call you back in an hour?" Marcus asked. "I need to discuss this with our finance committee." After hanging up, I realized something remarkable was happening. 6 hours ago, I'd been an undervalued employee begging for recognition. Now I was a consultant setting market rates and choosing my clients. Sarah texted again. "Derek just admitted to Janet that he doesn't know how to run your automated reporting system." She looks furious. "Also, Henderson's assistant called asking for your direct number. What should I tell them?" "Tell them I'll be available for consulting work starting Monday," I replied. "They can reach me through my personal email." By 5:30, my phone had recorded 12 missed calls from Meridian. Each voicemail revealed increasing desperation as they discovered new problems created by my sudden departure. Janet's message was particularly revealing. "Roxanne, it's Janet. I had no idea about the salary discrepancy Patricia mentioned. I've been reviewing Derek's work output, and frankly, I'm concerned about our ability to maintain quality standards without your oversight. Please call me back so we can discuss this situation properly." The last message came from Thomas Henderson himself at 6:45. "Miss Crawford, this is Tom Henderson. I received some concerning information about changes at Meridian, and I wanted to speak with you directly about potential consulting opportunities. Several colleagues have been asking about your analytical work, and we'd like to explore independent arrangements. Please call me at your convenience." I saved Henderson's number and began drafting a professional response email. Within 8 hours, my forced resignation had transformed into multiple consulting opportunities with clients who specifically valued my expertise. Marcus called back at 7:15 with a counteroffer. "We'll match any competing salary offer if you'll return immediately, plus a promoted title and additional vacation time." "That's generous," I replied, "but I'm no longer interested in employee positions. However, I'm happy to discuss consulting arrangements at the rates I mentioned earlier." "Roxanne, be practical about this," Marcus pleaded. "Consulting work is unpredictable. You're giving up job security and benefits for what might be temporary projects." I looked around the library at people pursuing education to improve their opportunities just like I had done years earlier. Sometimes security means betting on yourself instead of hoping others will recognize your value. "What's it going to take for you to come back?" Marcus asked finally. "Nothing," I replied honestly. "You can't come back from learning that your organization considers MBA credentials more valuable than actual competence. But I'm happy to help you through this transition as an independent consultant." The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd refused to pay me $66,000 annually as an employee who created substantial value. Now they were considering paying me over $150,000 annually as a consultant to perform the same work. Apparently my value had increased dramatically in the span of a single afternoon. The only thing that had changed was my willingness to accept their limitations. Wednesday morning, I woke up in my apartment with no alarm clock for the first time in 3 years. The sensation was disorienting but liberating. No urgent emails demanding immediate attention, no client deadlines creating artificial stress, no Derek requiring supervision disguised as collaboration. I made coffee and checked my phone to find 17 new messages from various sources. Thomas Henderson had sent a detailed email outlining consulting opportunities with his company and 2 others in his professional network. The proposed 6-month contract would pay $150 per hour for approximately 20 hours weekly, generating more income in 3 months than my entire annual salary at Meridian. Linda from accounting had forwarded my final paycheck information along with a note. "Sorry to see you go, Roxanne. Derek spent all yesterday afternoon asking Sarah how to access the systems you built. He seems completely lost without your documentation." Janet Morrison had sent a formal email requesting a transition meeting. "Roxanne, I've reviewed Derek's actual qualifications and work output since your departure yesterday. I was not involved in the compensation decisions Patricia discussed with you, and I believe serious mistakes were made. Could we schedule time to discuss how to properly recognize your contributions?" Marcus Webb's message was more direct. "After 24 hours of crisis management, it's clear that losing you creates operational risks I didn't fully understand. Derek has been unable to perform basic functions you handled routinely. We need to discuss terms for your immediate return, including substantial compensation adjustments." The most interesting message came from Patricia Hamilton. "Roxanne, I've completed a thorough review of our compensation structures and hiring decisions. There appear to be inconsistencies that require correction. I'd like to discuss how we can address these issues constructively." I deleted Patricia's message without responding and focused on the genuine opportunities emerging from yesterday's decision. By 10 o'clock, I'd scheduled phone interviews with Henderson's network contacts for Thursday afternoon. Both companies needed experienced financial analysts for project-based work, offering consulting rates that exceeded my previous annual salary in just a few months of engagement. My phone rang at 10:30 with an unknown number. "Miss Crawford, this is Jennifer Walsh from Capital Advisors Group. Thomas Henderson mentioned your availability for consulting work. We're a regional investment firm looking for someone with your expertise in mid-market financial analysis. Would you be interested in discussing a senior analyst position?" The conversation lasted 45 minutes and concluded with an invitation for a formal interview Friday morning. The position offered $85,000 starting salary, plus performance bonuses, stock options, and full benefits. More importantly, they specifically wanted someone who could bring in their own client relationships and develop proprietary analytical systems. "We've heard excellent things about your work from several sources," Jennifer explained. "Our CFO attended a presentation you gave at last year's CPA Society conference. He was impressed by your innovative approach to portfolio risk assessment." After hanging up, I realized my reputation in the regional business community was stronger than I'd understood. While I'd been focused on proving my worth to Meridian industry professionals, had been noticing my work through conferences, publications, and client referrals. Sarah texted around noon. "Derek just asked me how to calculate compound annual growth rates. I'm not kidding. He's supposed to present quarterly projections to the board tomorrow, and he doesn't understand the basic formulas. Janet is freaking out." I responded, "YouTube has excellent tutorials on basic financial mathematics." At 12:30, my phone rang with Marcus Webb's number. This time his tone had shifted from frustration to genuine concern. "Roxanne, I'm calling to formally apologize for yesterday's situation. I've been reviewing the circumstances around your resignation, and it's clear that serious errors were made in both compensation decisions and management communication." "I appreciate the apology, Marcus," I replied. "What specific errors have you identified?" "Patricia's handling of your compensation discussion was completely inappropriate," Marcus continued. "Her justifications for salary differences don't align with our stated policies or performance metrics. Additionally, our hiring process for Derek appears to have relied more on networking connections than competency assessment. This was more honesty than I'd expected. What are you planning to do about these identified errors?" "We'd like to offer you the position of finance manager, which would put Derek's role under your supervision," Marcus explained. "The salary would be $82,000 plus quarterly bonuses based on department performance. You'd have authority to restructure compensation within your team and implement whatever changes you think are necessary." I paused, processing the implications. "You're offering to make Derek report to me?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "We've realized that his supervision needs exceed what we can provide at his current level. Having him work under your guidance would benefit both his development and our operational stability." The irony was remarkable. 24 hours ago, Patricia had told me Derek's MBA made him inherently more valuable. Now they wanted to put him under my supervision because his prestigious education hadn't prepared him for actual work. "That's an interesting offer," I said, "but I've decided to focus on independent consulting rather than traditional employment." "What would it take for you to reconsider?" Marcus asked. We clearly made mistakes in recognizing your value, and we want to correct that situation. The situation revealed fundamental differences in how we view merit and compensation. I replied, those differences can't be corrected with title changes or salary adjustments. Marcus was quiet for several seconds. Could you at least consult with us during this transition period? Derek is struggling with responsibilities we didn't realize were so complex. I'm open to consulting arrangements, I confirmed, but only on the terms I outlined yesterday, $150 per hour minimum, 20 hours weekly, 6-month contract. That's expensive, Marcus admitted. It's market rate for the expertise you need, I replied. If Derek's strategic thinking capabilities are as valuable as Patricia claimed, perhaps he can handle the transition independently. By 2 o'clock, I'd received calls from 4 different companies interested in consulting services. Word was spreading quickly through professional networks that I'd left Meridian and was available for independent projects. The most surprising call came from Northwestern Business School's Executive Education Department. Ms. Crawford, we've been following your work in innovative financial analysis systems. Would you be interested in teaching a weekend seminar on practical applications of financial modeling for our MBA students? I almost laughed out loud. The same MBA program that supposedly made Derek more valuable than me was now asking me to teach their students practical skills. I'd be very interested in discussing that opportunity, I replied. Thursday morning brought news that transformed my understanding of the entire situation. Sarah called with information that explained everything. Roxanne, you're not going to believe this. I was helping Linda organize HR files and we found Derek's original application materials. His prestigious Northwestern MBA was completed part-time over 4 years with a 2.9 GPA. His previous job was managing inventory at his family's sporting goods store. The only consulting experience on his resume was helping his uncle reorganize the store's accounting system. She continued, but here's the really crazy part. His application includes a reference letter from someone named Bradley Hamilton in corporate HR. That's Patricia's maiden name. They're related somehow. The pieces finally clicked into place. Derek hadn't been hired based on merit or qualifications. He'd been hired through family connections, and Patricia had been protecting that arrangement by creating justifications about prestigious education and strategic value. There's more, Sarah continued. Linda found emails between Patricia and Derek from before he was even hired. They were discussing salary negotiations and how to position his background for maximum impact. She basically coached him through the entire process. The corruption was more extensive than I'd imagined. Patricia hadn't just defended an unfair compensation system, she'd actively created that system to benefit her relative while deceiving the rest of the organization about his qualifications. Has Marcus seen this information? I asked. Linda showed him everything this morning. He looked like he was going to be sick. Derek's been terminated and Patricia is meeting with the board of directors this afternoon. Within 6 hours, the entire structure that had justified my lower compensation had collapsed. Derek's strategic value, his prestigious education, his upward mobility potential, all of it had been elaborate fiction designed to hide nepotism and justify discrimination. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt relieved that I'd already moved beyond their system entirely. Whether Derek was qualified or not, whether Patricia was corrupt or not, whether they recognized my value or not, none of it mattered anymore. I was building something better. Friday afternoon, I signed consulting contracts with 3 different companies establishing steady income that would exceed my previous annual salary within 4 months. Henderson's company alone provided enough work to support my basic expenses, while the additional contracts allowed me to build substantial savings for the first time in my adult life. Jennifer Walsh from Capital Advisors had made her job offer official senior financial analyst position at $85,000 plus bonuses, with the explicit understanding that I'd bring my consulting clients and continue developing my independent practice on weekends. It was the perfect hybrid arrangement, providing employment benefits while maintaining entrepreneurial flexibility. My phone rang Saturday morning with an unexpected call from Patricia Hamilton. Her voice was subdued, lacking any trace of the corporate authority she'd wielded earlier in the week. Roxanne, I'm calling to personally apologize for my handling of your compensation discussion. I've been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into departmental hiring and salary decisions. I appreciate the call, Patricia, I replied, genuinely meaning it. I hope the investigation helps improve processes for future employees. I want you to know that my comments about your background and qualifications were inappropriate and don't reflect company policy or my personal views, Patricia continued. I was defending decisions that shouldn't have been made in the first place. The admission was more honest than I'd expected. What decisions are you referring to? Patricia hesitated before answering. Derek's hiring was influenced by personal relationships rather than merit-based assessment. I allowed that situation to continue and then created justifications that were unfair to you and other employees. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you deserved better treatment, and I want to take responsibility for my part in what happened, Patricia replied. You were right to leave. I hope you found opportunities that properly value your capabilities. After hanging up, I realized this conversation represented something important. Patricia's acknowledgement wouldn't change my past experience, but it might prevent future employees from facing similar treatment. Sunday afternoon, Marcus Webb called with a final update. Roxanne, I wanted to let you know that our board has approved significant changes to hiring and compensation policies. We're implementing mandatory equity reviews and skills-based assessment protocols to prevent future discrimination. That sounds like a positive development, I replied. We'd still like to discuss bringing you back in some capacity, Marcus continued. Your expertise and institutional knowledge would be valuable for our transition process. I'm committed to my consulting practice now, I explained, but I'm open to project-based work if you need specific assistance. Actually, that brings up an interesting opportunity, Marcus said. We're looking for someone to help redesign our entire financial analysis system based on the improvements you'd started implementing. It would be a 6-month consulting project worth approximately $120,000. I paused, calculating the implications. This single project would pay twice my previous annual salary for work I was uniquely qualified to perform. I'd be interested in discussing the project scope and timeline, I replied. Monday morning, I walked into my new office space, a small but professional suite I'd rented downtown. The nameplate on the door read, Crawford Financial Consulting. And for the first time in my professional life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My first official client meeting was with Thomas Henderson's company to finalize their quarterly portfolio analysis. As I reviewed their investment data, I realized my analytical skills had grown significantly during my time at Meridian, even while my compensation had remained stagnant. Henderson joined our meeting to discuss long-term consulting arrangements. Roxanne, your work has consistently exceeded our expectations. We'd like to retain you as our primary financial consultant for the foreseeable future. I appreciate the confidence you've shown in my work, I replied. I'm committed to maintaining the high standards you've come to expect. Actually, we'd like to expand our relationship, Henderson continued. We're considering offering you a board position with our company. You'd be our youngest board member ever, but your expertise justifies the appointment. The irony wasn't lost on me. 1 week ago, I'd been told my background didn't open doors. Now I was being invited to sit on corporate boards and teach MBA students at the same school that supposedly made Derek more valuable than me. Tuesday brought news that Derek had been hired by a smaller firm at $45,000 annually, 30% less than my previous salary. Sarah texted that he'd reached out to apologize and ask for career advice, humbled by his experience and genuinely wanting to develop real skills rather than relying on connections. I agreed to meet him for coffee Wednesday afternoon. He looked genuinely embarrassed as he explained his situation. I realize now that I was completely unprepared for that position, Derek admitted. I thought my MBA would be enough, but I never learned the practical skills you demonstrated every day. I'd like to ask for your advice on how to actually become competent at financial analysis. His humility was surprising and refreshing. What specific areas do you think need the most development? I asked. Everything, Derek replied honestly. I can discuss theoretical frameworks, but I can't build the systems or perform the detailed analysis that clients actually need. I want to earn my advancement instead of assuming I deserve it. I spent an hour providing genuine career guidance, suggesting resources for skill development, and explaining how to build competence through practical experience. Derek's willingness to admit his limitations and ask for help represented real growth. Thursday afternoon, I received a call that completed my transformation from undervalued employee to respected professional. Northwestern Business School offered me a position teaching their weekend executive education program on practical financial analysis. We've heard excellent feedback about your innovative approaches to portfolio management, the program director explained. Our MBA students need more exposure to real-world applications, and your consulting practice provides exactly that perspective. The teaching opportunity would add another income stream while establishing my reputation as an industry expert. More importantly, it would allow me to influence how future business leaders approach merit-based decision-making. Friday marked exactly 1 week since I'd walked out of Meridian Financial Solutions. In 7 days, I'd established an independent consulting practice, secured multiple high-value clients, been invited to join a corporate board, and offered a teaching position at the same business school Patricia had used to justify my inferior compensation. My income projections for the first year of consulting exceeded 3 times my previous annual salary. But beyond the financial improvement, I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that my worth wasn't determined by others' limitations or prejudices. Saturday evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing client proposals and planning curriculum for my first business school seminar. My mother called to check on my transition to consulting work. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, Roxanne," she said. "You've always been smart about recognizing when it's time to make changes." "I learned that from you," I replied. "You taught me that working hard matters, but working smart matters more." Sunday afternoon, I received an email from Patricia Hamilton with an unexpected attachment. She'd forwarded a message from the Meridian Board of Directors acknowledging that their investigation had identified systematic problems with hiring and compensation practices. "Your situation helped expose issues that needed addressing," Patricia wrote. "I hope that future employees will benefit from the changes your courage made possible." The email included an offer from Meridian to serve as an external consultant for implementing their new equity assessment protocols. The irony was perfect. They wanted to pay me as an expert to fix the system that had undervalued me as an employee. I accepted the consulting engagement not because I needed their validation, but because the work might prevent other talented people from facing similar discrimination. As I prepared for my first full week as an independent consultant, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed by simply refusing to accept limitations others tried to impose on me. Patricia's ultimatum to accept it or leave had been intended to keep me in my place. Instead, it had freed me to discover my actual value in a marketplace that rewarded competence over credentials. The best revenge wasn't proving them wrong about my capabilities. It was proving myself right about my potential. 1 year later, I walked into the same conference room where Derek had once fumbled my Henderson presentation, but this time as a board member myself. Crawford Financial Consulting had grown beyond my most optimistic projections, serving 12 regular clients and generating annual revenue that exceeded my former supervisor's salary. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Building a sustainable consulting practice required learning new skills in client relations, business development, and financial management that no employee handbook had ever covered. But each challenge had strengthened my confidence in my ability to create value independently rather than hoping others would recognize it. Henderson's company had become my anchor client, providing steady revenue that allowed me to be selective about additional projects. Our quarterly board meetings now included strategic discussions where my analytical insights directly influenced company direction. The same expertise that Meridian had undervalued was now shaping million-dollar business decisions. My teaching position at Northwestern had evolved into developing curriculum for their executive education program. Each semester, I shared my story with MBA students, emphasizing that credentials without competence create hollow careers, while competence without credentials still creates opportunities. The irony never got old. The school Patricia had used to justify Derek's superiority was now paying me to teach their students practical skills. 6 months earlier, Derek had completed a rigorous training program and earned a legitimate promotion to senior analyst at his new company. When he called to share the news, his genuine gratitude was touching. "I finally understand what real competence looks like," he told me. "Everything I thought I knew about business was just academic theory until I learned to actually perform the work. Thank you for treating me with respect I didn't deserve and helping me become someone who could earn it." His transformation reminded me that the system's problems weren't entirely about individual character. Derek had been raised to believe his credentials entitled him to success without effort, while I'd been taught that effort might eventually be rewarded with recognition. Both perspectives were incomplete. True success required combining effort with strategic positioning, competence with confident self-advocacy. Last month, I'd hired my first full-time employee, Sarah Chen, who'd grown frustrated with Meridian's slow pace of change despite their policy improvements. She brought analytical skills that complemented my consulting expertise, allowing us to take on larger projects and serve more clients effectively. "I want to work somewhere that actually values competence," Sarah had explained during her interview. "Watching your transition taught me that sometimes you have to create the environment you want, rather than hoping existing organizations will change." Patricia Hamilton had been terminated from Meridian after their investigation revealed systematic bias in hiring and compensation decisions. She'd reached out 6 months later to apologize again and ask for advice on rebuilding her career with more ethical practices. "Your situation taught me that defending unfair systems makes me complicit in perpetuating them," Patricia wrote in a thoughtful email. "I want to do better in whatever position I hold next." I'd provided references for her job search, believing that people could learn from serious mistakes if they committed to genuine change. Leadership required understanding how personal biases could create systemic problems, and Patricia's experience might make her a more thoughtful HR professional. Marcus Webb had implemented the equity assessment protocols we'd developed together, and Meridian's workplace culture had improved significantly according to Sarah's reports. They'd hired 2 additional CPAs, restructured their compensation system to reward performance over credentials, and established mentorship programs to support employee development. "It took losing our best analyst to realize we'd been measuring the wrong things," Marcus admitted during our final consulting session. "Your departure forced us to examine whether our values matched our practices." The personal changes had been equally significant. I'd bought my mother a house in a better neighborhood and paid off my student loans 2 years ahead of schedule. My relationship with Michael, a high school teacher I'd met at a community volunteer event, had grown into partnership based on mutual respect for each other's ambitions and independence. "You never talk about your work like it's a burden," Michael observed one evening as I reviewed client proposals. "It's refreshing to be with someone who found what they're meant to do." His support had been crucial during the challenging early months of building my practice. Unlike the men I'd dated previously, Michael wasn't intimidated by my success or concerned that my income exceeded his. He understood that partnership meant celebrating each other's achievements rather than competing for status. Last week, I'd received an invitation to keynote the Indiana CPA Society's annual conference, speaking to 300 finance professionals about entrepreneurial courage and recognizing professional worth. The theme of my presentation was simple: your value isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it, but by your willingness to demonstrate it consistently regardless of immediate recognition. I spent 3 years believing that working harder would eventually lead to fair treatment, I told the audience. I learned that fairness isn't something you earn through patience, it's something you claim through action. During the question period, a young analyst asked how to handle situations where supervisors consistently undervalue contributions despite documented evidence of superior performance. "First, document everything and present your case professionally," I replied. "But if the organization consistently chooses credentials over competence or connections over capabilities, recognize that as information about their values rather than your value. Then make decisions based on that information." The conversation reminded me of my own journey from hoping others would recognize my worth to understanding that recognition was less important than self-knowledge. Patricia's ultimatum to accept it or leave had seemed like a threat, but it was actually a choice between accepting limitations or discovering possibilities. After the conference, I drove through the neighborhood where I'd grown up, past the small apartment my mother and I had shared, past the library where I'd studied for countless hours, past the community college where I'd taken night classes to supplement my education. Each location represented a step in understanding that success wasn't about reaching destinations others had defined, but about creating paths that reflected personal values and capabilities. My phone buzzed with the text from one of my newest clients, a regional investment firm that had hired Crawford Financial Consulting to develop their entire portfolio analysis system. The project represented my largest single contract, worth more than I'd earned in 2 full years at Meridian. "Roxanne, the preliminary analysis you provided exceeded our expectations by such a wide margin that we want to discuss expanding the project scope. When could we schedule a meeting to explore additional opportunities?" I smiled while reading the message, remembering Patricia's insistence that my background didn't open doors. The truth was more nuanced. My background hadn't opened doors in their system, but it had prepared me to build my own doors when their system proved inadequate. The ultimate lesson wasn't about proving anyone wrong or achieving revenge against people who'd undervalued me. It was about understanding that other people's limitations don't define your possibilities. When Patricia told me to accept their system or leave, she assumed I needed their validation more than they needed my contribution. She was wrong about both assumptions. Building Crawford, financial consulting, had taught me that respect isn't something you request from others. It's something you demonstrate through consistently excellent work and confident self-advocacy. Fair compensation isn't something organizations grant out of kindness. It's something professionals command through proven value and strategic positioning. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best response to accept it or leave isn't arguing or pleading or hoping for change. Sometimes the best response is simply saying, "Thank you for clarifying my options," and choosing the path that leads toward growth rather than the path that leads toward acceptance of limitations. Standing in my office at Crawford Financial Consulting, surrounded by client testimonials, industry awards, and evidence of success I'd created independently, I realized that Patricia's ultimatum had been the greatest gift she could have given me. She'd forced me to discover capabilities I'd never tested and opportunities I'd never pursued. The phone rang with another potential client, a manufacturing company that needed sophisticated financial analysis for an acquisition they were considering. As I answered the call, I thought about all the talented people who might still be accepting limitations others had placed on them, waiting for permission to pursue their full potential. My story had started with discovering that hard work and competence weren't always rewarded fairly within existing systems. But it had ended with understanding that talented people could build their own systems where merit actually mattered, where contributions were valued appropriately, and where success was limited only by imagination and effort, rather than by others' prejudices or organizational politics. The most satisfying aspect wasn't the financial success or professional recognition, though both had exceeded my expectations. It was the knowledge that I'd stopped asking others to value me appropriately and started demonstrating my value consistently, regardless of their responses. As I prepared to meet with my newest client, I thought about young professionals who might currently be facing similar situations, working harder than colleagues who earn more, creating value that goes unrecognized, being told that credentials matter more than competence. I wanted them to know that accepting unfair treatment isn't noble patience. It's voluntary limitation of potential. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply refuse to accept others' definitions of your worth. When people tell you to accept it or leave, they're offering you a choice between settling for their limitations or discovering your possibilities. The answer should always be obvious. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to convince you that your background or circumstances made you worth less than you knew you were? How did you respond, and what did you learn about standing up for your true value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because every person who chooses possibilities over limitations makes it easier for others to do the same. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to accept limitations, and share this with anyone who might need to remember that their worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Thank you for listening to my journey from undervalued employee to independent success, and I hope it inspires you to never settle for less than you deserve. Remember, the only person who can truly limit your potential is you, and the only permission you need to pursue your dreams is your own willingness to start.